Hello? I'm not so good at winging it, so I'm just gonna... In December of 2014, just before Christmas, my daughter was murdered with her mother passing here in Windsor. Because there were still a handful of weeks before she was born, and because the egregiously violent circumstances of the crime left no opportunity for her to be extracted from her mother's body, the killer would only be held accountable in Canadian courts for one life. Had this taken place a couple miles away over the river, our daughter Molly would have been recognized as a victim. There would have been 2 murder charges. Instead, her existence in this world, along with any accountability for violating her mother's choice to make it so, went unrecognized by law. At some point in the madness of it all, I began to try to understand the social and political mechanics that allowed for such a gross minimalization of this experience to exist. How can this be acceptable in a fair and civil country like Canada? What I've discovered is that mine are not the only circumstances where a reasonable expectation of justice was not met, and that their murderer is not the only violent offender who is benefiting from what seems to be an invisible driving force, watering down personal responsibility for violent criminal actions. People like us, gathered here today, are everywhere in this country. If someone asked me to use a single word to describe my experience of the last 5 years, I would say isolation. I would have never imagined how poignant it could be. The death of a loved one effectively erases part of our existence. It is a deeply personal thing that we all experience at one time or another. But to have loved ones violently taken by the hands of a criminal who intended to do so is something different. The personal experience becomes intertwined with the social response. When that response is inadequate or its integrity can be shown to be false, further isolation is imposed upon us. Reintegrating into society is a term we use to understand what an offender experiences at the end of their sentence. But non-offenders, the victims of their crime, also have to reintegrate. We have to climb out of the dark chaos of our own tragedies and find a way to function again. We depend, in a large part, on our social systems of justice to do so. When they fail, the burden is ours. These systems are more than just the courts. It's more than just our lawmakers in prisons. It's the very language echoed in the media that diminishes our experience and gives way to the soft bigotry of low expectations we have to face. Life isn't light. It very seldom is. But the word is still used in a way that exaggerates to a passing observer a sense of severity. Parole eligibility is also a fiction of the headlines. Inmates can be allowed out of prison years before an eligibility set forth by a judge comes to pass. The doublespeak is everywhere. Healing lodges, faint hope clauses, rehabilitation, and reintegration are all words reserved for offenders. There are no equivalent terms or treatments for the victims and the survivors of crime. All we have is our basic expectation of justice. In my case, there was no law to recognize the crime. When pressed on the issue, local lawmakers suggested stronger policies of prevention. While the importance of prevention should not be understated, to ignore the fact that this crime had already taken place and the basic expectation of justice was not met was nothing short of discrimination. Yet somehow the smokescreen of prevention gave them a pass in the media. They suffered no scrutiny for their indifference to how the crime was being experienced by the victims. I had to leave my community to have the issue taken seriously. Criminal law is under the jurisdiction of the federal government. Policies are cemented by them and them alone, when the Prime Minister smugly scolds members of the government for bringing forward victims' issues, what he's really doing is telling every Canadian that we don't matter.
Correct.
When he refers to those echoings of our concerns in Parliament, as ambulance chasers, what he's really saying is that you and I, we're all just playing the part of the video. We don't exist. And when the media fails to contextualize such an outburst as an example of discrimination pointed at a marginalized group of people, maybe he's right. Maybe we don't exist. And here we are. There are so many things to say on this subject that still need to be said. But for the sake of time, I want to close by focusing on two things. First, I want to highlight the fact that there is no national voice that represents these issues. Each one of us is made to stand alone at a time of profound tragedy and battle a force that we don't understand or may not have even known existed. This is something that needs to change. Until it does, I want to suggest finding a way to connect individuals and groups under a sort of network of non-offenders, where social and political discriminations against victims can be put into context. Perhaps our collective experience can offer the next family or group some sort of guidance in the madness of it all. But its primary objective will be to raise the veil on social constructs that serve to further isolate and diminish victims in their navigation of these systems of justice. We need to support each other in ways that support doesn't exist in Canada. We need to amplify our collective voices when individually it is being muted. We need to stand together, and this is one way I think we could. I don't know how exactly, but we got to do it. We got to figure it out. Second, in less than a month from now will be our next federal election. Criminal law falls directly under the jurisdiction of the federal government. These are the people who set the standards for the very issues we're gathered here today for. Needless to say, this election is vitally important to the direction we take as a society. We will progress further down a road. Will we progress further down a road of indifference, continuing to foster these illusions of justice? Or will policies and laws be inclusive to the victims and their experience? I urge you to get out and vote, but not just to vote. Participate. Whoever it is you throw your support behind, look into their record. No doubt they'll all claim to support justice and fairness. But do they suggest prevention of crime in place of justice for it? Do they have a blind spot for people like us? If you want the truth, look for their contradiction. It is often very telling. Engage your local candidates. Yes, they will all say they support victims' rights, but ask them to show them how they do this in practice. Does it make sense? Please help amplify our voice. Get out and vote. I wish I had more things suited to a vigil to say, but the fact is the ones we are here for deserve more than that. And it's time to see that they get it. I want to make a particular note that Henry Lau from the Conservative Party, the federal
Thank you very much.
He's vying for leadership, and Mr. Brian Massey are here, and I greatly appreciate that. I can't emphasize how important it is that we understand these are federal issues. These are federal issues. I know me and Mr. Massey have had our differences, but I appreciate that you're here and that you're making an effort. And Mr. Lau, you as well. And I want to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to speak, and for everybody that took the time to listen. If you have questions, I'll be here. You can ask me. Otherwise, I hope to see you in Ottawa on the October 16th. Thank you.